Hello, this is Fluffy Tail. The last time we saw Fluffy Tail, she wasn't quite strong enough to go into the crypt, but today she felt like exploring. Of course, she would still get a little too overzealous and end up pulling too many enemies. Back for round 2, she decided that after pulling again too many enemies, she would just run for the entrance for safety. Here in the crypt, she would be met by that all too familiar dampness and dank smell that she was introduced to in the last episode when she found the entrance through the sewers. Here, Fluffy Tail would actually join up with an adventurer and take down the mega spider. Unfortunately, her new friend would soon fall to some poison shortly after, but don't worry, the entrance was close enough. The fun thing about this game is that it's typically never too hard to find a group to journey through some dungeons. This would also be a good time for her to socialize and practice her animal speech. Of course, here in the crypt, she also had some tasks that she needed to get done. But the loot was always a plus. This would, of course, also be a great place to gain some XP and levels. Here in the crypt resided a bunch of puzzles that needed to be solved as well for some extra loot. Fluffy Tail would continue her journey through the crypt, exploring every nook and cranny with her new friend. Fluffy Tail would also find some other groups of adventurers, but it would make it easier to loot some of these chests. Here they were at a bit of a crossroads, deciding if they should journey forth or attempt this boss here. Another mechanic of Project Gorgon is that sometimes it can be risky to take on a boss if you're unprepared, as they typically inflict curses that cannot be dispelled until you defeat that boss. Fluffy's new adventuring pal seemed to have no reservations or cautions regarding fighting this boss and would just run in. Of course, knowing that the potential risk would be getting cursed if they failed and seeing how fast her friend was dying, she decided to retreat. Of course, Fluffy Tail was still lacking gear and sorely lacking level and skills and ended up dying, which was fine. It allowed her to regroup with her friend. This time, Fluffy Tail and her new companion would travel down a different path and explore a new area. She would actually end up returning to the original spot where she was introduced to the crypt through the sewers. Here, Fluffy Tail decided that her new companion's propensity to run in without thinking things through would get her killed at some point. So she decided to leave the group and asked to join a couple of animal companions. Luckily, they decided to agree and invited Fluffy Tail to their hunting party. She was undoubtedly being carried by this deer who was just making enemies explode. They would actually end up in the hallway of the Nameless Guardian again, where they could rematch. This fight with the Nameless Guardian would actually end up not being too much of a challenge for Fluffy Tail's new party. Fluffy Tail and her new companions would continue to journey on down the hallway, gaining more XP in the process. Here they would run into some energy keys, which are sort of like mini bosses that are guarding something. Further down the hall, they would run into their second boss, a giant rhino. This, of course, would also not be too much of a challenge for Fluffy Tail's new party. Continuing past the rhino would actually be a trap spider that by defeating all 3 energy keys would release, and talking to him would unlock the animal form of spider, but Fluffy Tail was not too interested in it. A lot of the endgame in Project Gorgon is just managing storage, and here we can see that it is starting to become a problem for Fluffy Tail. In Project Gorgon, just about every item has some form of use and is used at some point, so it becomes very difficult to manage all the items. It's especially harder for animal forms because a lot of the people in Circle do not like speaking to animals, and a lot of them have storage. Fluffy Tail and her party would eventually make their way back to the main chamber and down the other hallway. Going this way would lead to unlocking the class of Necromancy, which Fluffy Tail was considering as her secondary ability set. To unlock this class, they would of course first have to defeat this boss and a couple subsequent bosses. After the boss's defeat, Fluffy Tail and her party would continue deeper into the crypt. Here, the greatest threat was probably the ambushing exploding sheep. Here, the boss, the Omega Spider, would actually prove rather fatal for the party, ending up in a wipe. This just goes to show that every fight and encounter typically requires a little bit of forethought. They would of course make their way back and continue their journey. This time the Omega Spider would be defeated before Fluffy Tail could even catch up, but she still got the loot. And unfortunately another party was here fighting Kirlick's true form, meaning that they would have to wait. Another mechanic in Project Gorgon is that only the party that started the fight with the boss can loot the boss. We would have to wait for Kirlick's true form to respawn, as Kirlick's true form dropped the item required to unlock the Necromancy class. This mysterious green crystal in the next room would be the key to unlocking the Necromancy class, but first we would need that item from Kirlick. First, the party would make their way back to the entrance of the crypt so that they could grab one of their fallen party members. After another dead Mega Spider, after another dead Kirlick, after another dead Omega Spider, we have finally made our way back to the true form Kirlick. And finally, after another dead true form Kirlick, we are finally able to unlock the class. Now, another problem with the animal forms is that because you don't have hands to equip the staff, you would have to use other items like this Necromancy test medallion to be able to even use the skills. With the Necromancy class now unlocked, the party would say their farewells and split up. Fluffy Tail now had some work to do leveling her new class. Now, the new annoying part about Necromancy is that it required Necromancy dust, and this could only be made through a ritual during a certain time inside of the cemeteries. Luckily, right now is the perfect time to grind some bones and do this ritual. This ritual would net a very small amount of Necromancy XP, which would help out for the early levels, and yes, it actually takes this long. Fluffy Tail would soon summon her first undead minion to help her grind out some of these bones. but she would pretty much spend the entire night here just grinding enough dust until she felt comfortable. Once Fluffytail had enough necromancy dust, she would make her way back to Serval. And of course here we can see another annoyance about necromancy. A lot of NPCs do not like seeing or smelling the undead, and so you are typically resorted to having to walk away, having them wait, and then returning back to the NPC. As you don't want to dismiss them, because then you'd just be wasting necromancy dust. Here Fluffytail remembered that in order to complete the main quest, she would also have to talk to Velcourt. She had been sidetracked for so long that she kind of forgot about Dalvos. Here, Fluffytail decided that she'd finally do a little bit of storage and selling and clean up her inventory. It was now finally the end of Fluffytail's journey for today. She had accomplished a lot today, unlocking the class of Necromancer, and now was ready to face some new challenges. Hello, and thank you again for watching the third installment of the Tales of Fluffytail. It's been quite a journey. I've had these recordings for quite a few weeks, but I've been super busy with finals and just end of semester stuff, work, never ending. So, thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you guys next time. Goodbye.